Didn't like it.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to the second installment of our book review on Canoeing the Mountains. Those of you who are watching with us online or maybe watching this at a later date, thank you. We hope the audio is much better this time. Continue to give us feedback on either the lighting or the sound so that we can continue to improve our process. I'd like to begin in prayer, and then after that, we'll do a quick review of what your takeaways were from the last time we met, and then we'll launch into this second sections, which are chapters 4 through 6. So let's pray together. Lord, we ask your blessing upon this time, on our reflection of the material that has been digested, and to play it into our own context, that we may see a way forward, that in the stopping power that some of this information has for us, we pray that it wouldn't keep us stuck, but instead will spur us on to adventure and to risk. For in that, we know there is reward when we risk for you. So Lord, help us to be discerning and wise in our conversation this evening. In the name of Jesus, we pray these things. Amen. Amen. So share, if you would, any of your takeaways from last week.
For me, it was instead of changing, to adapt. So I'm really getting to adapt and go away from that word because nobody wants to change. There's nobody here. So trying to tell the group, our small group, listen, we're going to adapt without compromising, of course, what we stand for. I mean, that's a given, but we need to adapt. So that was big, very big.
Big. How was it big for you emotionally or for your group?
No, for the group, yes, the group, because everybody don't like change, and we don't like change. We refuse to change. So to adapt is totally a different story, because we need to adapt. Hello, we're in this world, so we need to.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks. Other reflections, takeaways from last week. One of the things for me that continues to inform my reading is this is not well, there is a choice, but we don't have a choice for the predicament that we are in. We don't have a choice about our situation. Our situation is as it presents itself. And that can either be something that causes us to duck our heads back inside of our shells or put our head in the sand and just hope it all blows over. Continuing to do the same things. Or instead of responding with fear, we can choose to respond with courage and to adapt again that spirit of adventure. And so I'm interested, was there anyone who made some sort of progress along those lines of moving away from, oh, what in the world are we going to do? Our church is the world today, oh, it's going to hell in a handbasket, into maybe this is an adventure I can sign up for. And there's some energy and passion. Did you get there? Are you not there? Help me with that.
I think for me, I was looking too much at tradition and not enough at, okay, tradition's nice and it has a need to fit in, but as a person, you've got to grow. And if you're going to grow, then the church has got to grow too. So I came to the conclusion that while certain things changing upset me in the past, that I had to get past that and move on and just look for the future and see what could be done to help grow the church.
Wow, that's huge. Yeah, to move beyond that personal preference into for a greater good. Thanks. Anybody else want to chime in before we move into our notes for the next chapters?
I made a whole lot of notes in my book as I was reading. And for me, it outlined a structure for a path.
You are now my favorite person in this entire and I really think that that's true about this particular section. And I'll tell you, one of my concerns, and I was talking with Mark and Virginia about this earlier in the week, that as we reflect on these 3 chapters, the tendency is going to want to jump in and start doing the work. And really, these chapters are about the work that's ahead of us and the framework and the journey that we're going to need to take together. So you may be fantastic and not go down that road. I tend to go into fixing the problems and to addressing it. So maybe as we journey together tonight, we can agree that if somebody starts doing the work, we will simply, let's pause and say that those are good ideas. Let's hold off on those. But what does it say about the structure and the process before we go through? Yeah, very exciting. All right, so chapter 4, the idea of competence and credibility. Anybody have a particular, here in the beginning, a note or something they want to lift up that really struck them in their reading?
I guess it struck me that as I was reading that as part of our discussions prior to that you still have to be good at what you've been doing. You know, they didn't just quit everything and say, well, it's all different. Let's stop doing anything and plan on what to do. They still had a goal. They still had to get to it. It still involved walking and breathing and eating. Things that they knew how to do. So, you know, the fact that it was an uncharted territory didn't mean you stop what you're doing now. You have to adapt to what's changing, but there's a lot of what you carry over. And it seems to me that in some of, you know, moving ahead, some people look at it as, you know, just check everything we've done prior to this, because it's all new, so nothing fits. Well, a lot of stuff still needs to be done, you know. Be able to turn the air on, you gotta have a building to be in, and you know, it may not look the same, but you still need them. And so, you know, the sort of baby out with the bathwater syndrome that really struck me that's the technical competence. You gotta carry it over, and you gotta have something to carry over when the time comes. You can't just kill off the institution and have nothing left.
Right. Very expensive to do so. Extremely risky.
Well, right, and then you really help yourself by the time you're done.
Yeah, I think also, Eric, to completely agree with you. You also got to dance with the one that got you here. Right. You know, there's a whole generations of people who love this church, who have served this church, who pour their heart and soul into it. We cannot abandon them because we decide we want to maybe do something in a new direction, and that we do have to continue to do and claim the things that have been historically Aloma's personality, its key values to moving forward.
Right.
That was one of the things that struck me too, was that we need to realize what our DNA is. What is it that really makes us who we are, and not just throw it all away. But then the next thing was to make sure that everybody feels like no matter what, they're going to be taken care of spiritually and loved unconditionally. And until we can really do that, they won't go anywhere with us. Because they won't trust us.
True.
So I just think I think that's real vital.
I think one of the questions that will be before us as we move forward is, so what places are we currently doing well and exercising proficiency? And what places do we need to shore up before we move forward? Not that we'll go too far down that road, because we sure would need to press pause. What are some things we can celebrate that we feel like right now we're doing this pretty competently? We have some capacity here.
Yeah, the worship service itself, both of them. I think that the service that is coming in on the first service and second service is performing what it's supposed to. We've got good sermons from you, we've got good music, we've got things being done right in those services that are leading to serving the people that are there in the church. Great.
I think we've always done a really good job of recognizing that our church is extremely diverse, and especially in worship, that we we don't just have one congregation that likes contemporary, one congregation that likes traditional. We have navigated over the many years the ability to do both services. Whereas many, many churches have said, you know, we're going to go one way or the other. We're not going to try to, you know, cater to both. And I think we've done that intentionally, and I think we've done it well to the ability, you know, that we have had. So I think we've done that well and honors both styles of worship. Not that everybody gets everything that they like in every worship service. That's not going to happen, or it's going to, the worship service is going to be 10 hours long to get everything in everybody wants. But that we've tried intentionally to honor people who like traditional, to keep it traditional. Those who like contemporary, to keep it contemporary. And I think that's really a strength of
In natural church development, they would call that particular skill inspiring. We have inspiring worship. And it's inspiring to the demographic that we serve here in the two ways in which we do that. One of the things I'd like to share that in my brief experience here, I walked into a very fiscally responsible church, and I experience us as continuing to do that. Our staff works hard at not overspending or pays attention to the bottom line, as well does our leadership. And even though our giving is not where we'd like it to be right now in support of the budget, our spending reflects that, and we are in a good place financially. I think that is a huge, huge thing for a church.
I have felt like we have been very strong in missions. I think for the longest time, up until maybe the last 2 years, we were really known as a church that reached out, particularly to foreign missions. Although we had close violence too, feeding the hungry, feeding the homeless once a month, doing some of the things that we do as we go out, the schools, helping in the schools, all of those kinds of things that have been outreach things have been really, really positive. And yet I'm beginning to not feel as much of that anymore. And I cringe at that. That bothers me.
So the international versus local and
Well, all of
to all of it.
All of
Okay.
it.
All right.
And maybe it's just not publicized, and so I don't hear from it. You know, that may be part of it, because
Okay. Well, before we have to press pause on this, it wouldn't be fair, I don't think, to only talk about the things where we're showing technical proficiency. Where are some places that we feel like we really need to have first addressed and improved?
yesterday sounded like technical.
Okay, all right.
Except for a little bit of static. You know, but I mean, there was no.
I think that's communication,
Okay, communication.
so that people have a better understanding of what's going on, where we're heading, what we're doing. And I think that increases trust as people kind of feel that they're included in knowing what's happening.
Great.
And we work on rebuilding more small groups and Bible study. We've got people that live all over Union Park, UCF, you know, all Winter Park area. And I think if we could get more of those going in people's homes, that we could build groups back again with some strength.
I've been impressed by the looks of our website now. It looks really nice. Pleased with the way it's
Okay. So communications.
going.
Okay.
Thank you.
Functional structures, for me as an observation, as a manager as well as a leader, we're just kind of learning more about that, how our management team works, how our lay leadership team works, the functional structures that operate our order of inclusion, and that is how do we get people in small groups? How do we get families recognized and pipelined into our children's ministry or youth ministry? That's very personality driven right now. It's driven by one or two people instead of a system of people. And I think that would be very helpful. You got to start with the person who's going to get to the system.
Mhm.
Okay.
To jump off that point for a second, like I've said this in the late leadership meeting before, where we have a really friendly church, and that people who are a part of the congregation who've been here for many years. I mean, we have a very large segment of our congregation that has been here for years and years and years. They wouldn't have stayed here if they didn't feel included. But I think off of that, we haven't done a good job of finding ways to bring those people, to bring the new people into the fold. And a lot of our Sunday school classes and other groups have been kind of static. They've brought in a group of people and then they've just kind of become a friend group that just operates within itself. And figuring out how do we now open those groups, whether they're formal groups or even informal, where it's just friend groups, to bring new people into that fold. So that when people come to the church, it's not just that they're welcome, that they're greeted, their hand is shaken, but they are invited to lunch, and then they're invited to that person's small group, and they very quickly can become a part of that church family.
Yeah, being inclusive is not the absence of negative behavior.
Yeah.
It's not the absence of being you're not a bad group or anything. To be inclusive, it has to be a positive action. It takes effort and work. And those are learned skills. And they have to be practiced.
But I do know I'm hearing still a good bit of discussion about the fact that we're losing some of that feeling. I mean, losing the feeling of the togetherness because of the absence of the fellowship time. I just hear a lot of that, but not enough that says I'll take charge and make it happen.
We did, small group communicated with the pastor. He said in the meeting, if you are willing to do it, let's do it. I communicated, we are some. We have a couple of people in the fellowship that they're willing to do it too, and inside for living.
Yeah, it seems to me that having been fallow for a brief time, that some folks are saying, well, I think we actually have enough and we could, and what would it be like? And are beginning to take ownership and begin to move forward, which is fantastic. We can get there.
And I think also, excuse me, John, Robert, are you here? Saw you walk is here because of the out front, because of the out front team. And I think that says a whole lot.
So donuts.
Call us the donuts.
All right, we're going to press pause, and these are some great notes to help us when we get to this place after we finish reading through the book. I just want to say this, I think it's a great quote. Trust is gained like a thermostat and lost like a light switch. Darn it. It speaks for itself. Anything else? As you read through and maybe your highlights and notes from chapter 4.
I like that comment where he said, he was told, so you need to fail as soon as you can so that you can learn as quickly as possible. That it's okay to fail and to try things and then reevaluate, and then eventually you'll figure out what God actually wants.
Okay.
But it's okay to fail, and I just like, you need to get to failing so that you can get the word of God.
Here it says, in Uncharted Territory, trust is essential as a human root. If trust is lost, the journey is over.
Very much so.
There's a part on page 55 that was talking about getting clear on what will never change. And I think once you create constants for people, those a mission statement or a vision or whatever that thing is that won't change for people, then when we do start to adapt and institute changes, we'll be able to return to that one thing and have something to stand on together and say, these things are changing, but we have solid ground on this. This is what we believe in, where we can jump off into the future. We know we can come back to this island of safety because everybody wants to have safety, but we still have to adapt and move, but we have that thing that we know won't ever change. Yeah, the core beliefs and all of those kinds of things.
There's a way to write about that. I'm sorry I don't remember the book and the author that writes that talks about this, but it's basically giving statements you're not allowed to do, and then anything else is open. So when we are able to come up with those key values and key ideas, we say you can do anything so long as it doesn't go against these ideas. And it really, instead of you have to fit in this narrow box, we say you just can't not fit, or you can't go outside of these boundaries. But other than that, go for it. And it really creates some wonderful permission-giving environments and responsibility taking by individuals. We'll maybe read that months from now. Sorry, I can't remember what. Yeah, great number. I had from probably 68-ish. Am I too far ahead? Oh, sorry, I got into chapter 5. Anything else from chapter 4?
Yeah, I highlighted on the bottom 59, it says when our attempts at innovation go awry, it's because we have something to learn, and not because we mishandle an otherwise good idea. So how do we know the difference?
That's an excellent question. I'm interested to see what someone brilliant has to say.
I think part of that goes back to technical competence. If we're competent in the things that we're supposed to be doing normally, and hitting those bases, I think that's part of it. The other part is doing evaluation and thinking through what were the pros, the cons, what, and see, did we miss something that made the difference? I wouldn't know of any other way to do it except intentional evaluation.
I agree that I think that's the difference is, it could have been mishandled or it could have been, just something that failed naturally, but the result is the same, it failed. The issue then is going forward, what do you do about that failure? Whether it was mismanagement or whether it was other, is that you evaluate what happened to go forward to change the things as you're going. I think it's in the evaluation. To learn from whatever the mistake was.
And there's a statement on page 59, and it says failure is the necessary part of learning and therefore a necessary part of being. So we learn a lot by our mistakes. What not to do, not necessarily what to do, but what not.
Well, I think in the church world as well, help us with that mismanagement concept. If you've never changed the spark plugs and oil in your car, it would be foolish of you to go buy a ratchet set and say you're going to rebuild the heads on your engine. So we have to make sure that if we're going to be doing that type of a project, we have some experience with other light mechanic duties. We have an awesome set of tools. We have a manual. We've done our work ahead of time and demonstrated that we're a pretty decent mechanic and can make our way around an engine. We can tackle this bigger project. And for us to say, let's go start a hip hop worship service. And yet we don't have a single person that has ever rapped in their life in our church, nor do we, that would just be foolish. So it's that, have we demonstrated that we did this idea with some technical proficiency and with some history and work ahead of time, and we've given it our best shot. I think our web is this we're doing right now is a good example. Liz researched it, figured out the best method with which to utilize this. We deployed that last week. And even through our research, we didn't know we needed to have a mixer and 2 different types of microphones to pick this up. So I'm hopeful that when we get feedback, that people will say, I can actually hear what was going on. And then hopefully it will be much better.
Yeah.
Technical competence as we respond to feedback and try to make improvements.
Also reframing the idea that because the sound wasn't good last week, that that was a failure in a way. It was a technical difficulty, it didn't work, but we didn't say we're gonna scrap it. We figured out what's the next step after the thing that didn't work, and we framed it and not looking at it as a failure, looking at it as like the next learning step of taking it to the next level after you have not done as well as you could have done.
And we devised a solution, tested it earlier today, and it didn't work. And so we had to go to another solution that has tested that, and it's actually working, at least we think it is. So
Sounds good.
yeah. And you look dynamite.
Oh, thank you.
You're fantastic. We'll get a shot of that later when you're watching at home. All right, good stuff. Leaving chapter 4, anything that we want to chime in on here before we move along into chapter 5?
I wanted to go back to Linda's comment and just wanted to know that I think the key there is just the word innovation, and that it's something new and it's a new idea. It's not doing the same old thing. And so I think that kind of adds a little context to the entire thought with that. And the example of the sound is perfect in that.
Husband and wife, we're gonna get yeah. All right, thanks, Latrice. Anything else in chapter 4? I want to make sure we don't leave anybody behind. Okay. So going back to Dale's thought process, this is a way in which we're going to be able to move forward as a group. We're not going to finish this book and go, okay, now we know how to fix the church. But instead, it will enable us to move through a process where we're going to need to identify what are the key values and historical strengths of our congregation. What are the things that we are going to choose to build on that are going to remain the same? What are the uncompromisables? What are we not willing on which to compromise? And then I think in the near term, what is it we have to continue to do well that we can't take resources from, that continues to have to be a priority for us? I think that's going to be pretty challenging because there are things in Aloma's history as a much larger church where they could afford many more priorities than we can right now. And it's going to mean some pretty difficult decisions about we're really going to focus our attention in these areas, and these other places we're just going to have to look at maintaining. And there may be even still a few places that we'll have to say, we're going to have to let this one go for the sake of these new things we're going to risk for keeping emphasis on pastoral care or congregational care. All right, so chapter 5, preparing for the unknown. Feels very much like Star Trek.
I thought chapter 5 was a very good point about leadership. A lot of times, people will take over leadership and think that makes them the boss, rather than trying to bring other people along with them. And like in this case, co-leaders, and never brought up the fact that they were of different ranks and stuff and things like that. I think it also points out that you have to be able to work as a team. Even if you're the head of the group, you still have to work as a team and mold everybody to be supported. And I think they certainly did that.
I thought the part on building trust was important. And when he asks, how is trust increased, he answers through actions.
One of the things for those of you who are in management and lay leadership, and in staff meeting as well, those of you who aren't, I'll let you in, that a couple months ago, we came back from a conference, and one of the things I wanted to instill was some time of caring for each other at the beginning of each meeting, and to go around and to talk about how life was, how we can pray for each other, and that emotional connection. And for me, one of the quotes, and I believe it's page 68, is this: relational congruence is more than consistent behavior. It is constancy that comes from genuine affection, warmth, and indeed love for followers and colleagues. And so my goal in those moments is to create genuine affection and love and care for one another as persons, so that as then we go about doing leadership work of the church and the management work of the church, that we do so loving first, even if we may disagree on a course of action for whatever's next.
It really stressed the relationships. This chapter really stressed.
I think it's easier to disagree with somebody and build that relationship.
I'm in a small group that we are very different politically, loud and vociferous disagreements. But we love each other, and so we're still friends, and we still work together, and we still live and let live, you know. As much as we try to change each other's opinions. But it does make all the difference in the world if you've got that trusting relationship.
Engaged in meaningful work together if they are to transcend individual concerns and develop new capacities. Only meaningful work together develops the kinds of relationships that will endure into uncharted territory. This goes back to Martha, Virginia, to your comment about maybe a lack of sense of mission, that there's not as much locally that we used to do and as many people involved. That side by side, let's do this together, that whatever this is extremely important in our ability to create trust and to be able to move forward. And I think this is an extremely important concept in the order of inclusion and bringing new people into the congregation, into this community of faith. We have to engage in the meaningful work. And one of my concerns moving forward from a staff perspective is, what do we do with the new folks who come and say, I love the worship here. I'm meeting some great friends in a small group. How do we get them to work? And what does that look like? And how do we have a very, if you want to work with kids here, if you want to reach homeless here, if you want to work with English as a second language here, if you insert the what if, congregational care, serving on the sound system. Our functional structure for getting people into that is Susan. And she's amazing, but how do we begin to create a network so that people can more easily step in side by side? That's how you lock the back door. What happens in churches when they begin to grow and catch the spirit, so to speak, people are attracted to that. And if we don't employ them in significant relationship and significant work, within 3 to 4 months, they walk out the back door and disappear. Because they will only be entertained for so long. So, which is can be a danger of only worship that it is entertaining.
I think somehow the small groups might be the key in that, because I'm in a small group right now that out of the study that we were doing, chose to be doing some things for a shelter for abused women who had to leave home fast and couldn't take anything with them. So, and all of that not only brought a cohesiveness to the group, but it began to give a real care and what else can we do for those ladies? And so, but it grew out of a small group study, and I wonder if we might, in our,
Well, I think that's a really good point. And I would also invite us to consider flipping that on its head. That there are people who will come together as strangers to help people because they have an affinity or a history with women in that same situation. And out of that help, we develop a small group. You're right. So it's lots of ports of entry, and how do we manage that in a functional structure that has great communication, and built on our core values and things that won't change. There you go. That's all. We'll be done by Thursday at 5. Okay. How about when we love each other and are dedicated to our mission, we change? You believe that? Does that sound right to you? That was one of the assertions by our author. When we love each other and are dedicated to our mission, we change. What do you think that says?
Got two focuses then. Love each other, mission. You both.
Somewhere in here he says, love precedes change. And, you know, I guess that I highlighted that sentence you just read, and I was thinking really more in terms of how much we focus on our love for God and His love for us, that enables us to love one another. And because of God's love for us and our love for Him, then we love His mission. So I think all of that, and so as I thought about that, those three words, love precedes change, it seems so powerful to me in a lot of different ways. It applies here in trying to navigate change as a church, but it also applies as we allow God to transform our lives. It's a key dynamic, a lot of power to it.
Sounds like a sermon.
Glad I could help.
Oh, no. That was really, really, really great. Thank you.
I know for me, when I read this chapter, I made highlights and I underlined things, but for me, I actually processed it more by asking questions and writing out questions. One of them was, does the congregation see that we love each other? And so whether that's within the congregation, those that are just kind of new to it, or those that are completely outside of this church, do they actually see that we love each other and that we love our mission? And then the second question that I had, and I'm sorry, John, it puts you more on the spot than most of the people, I put, how can John and our leadership, so that's our collective leadership, like our staff, our lay leadership, management, everything, how can our leadership of our church create greater trust? Because I think that's kind of the whole message of this entire thing, is the emphasis of relationship and trust. And once those things are solidified, it doesn't matter what obstacle is there, you can just mow past it or over it, depending on how you read the book. And so those were my processing questions. So maybe that was not somebody's mind, but yeah.
Well, how about let's take that last question. How can leadership create greater trust? We're here because we're interested in leadership and being part of that, whether we are elected into that or here saying I'm willing to be a person who helps me work through this change and inspire it. What are some ideas? How can leadership create greater trust?
And somewhere in these chapters, he talks about that the first ones who need to change are leaders. Leaders have to experience the change. And if I think we go back to the relational congruence as leaders, and he says relational congruence is the ability to be fundamentally the same person with the same values in every relationship and every circumstance, and especially amidst every crisis. So as leaders in our relationships with one another, as we work together in our relationships with others in the congregation, I think the trust is built when they see that we're the same and how we relate with one another and how we support one another. And I think that's a key thing. The relational congruency applies to all of us. And I think that's a challenge sometimes. As leaders, we can get frustrated with certain things, but how do you handle that frustration? How are you going to, for the good of the church, how are you going to reject as in a crisis that is going to help the church navigate through that crisis? Are people seeing consistency with leadership, or you handling things one way in a meeting and then go out and expressing your frustration about the whole thing? to individuals, and it undermines, what collectively as leaders we would be trying to do. So that's part of the reason that I think it puts emphasis on change needs to begin with the leaders.
That reads into the Christ's concept of reaching for unity and wishing for unity in the church and for the disciples. Be unified in how we love each other and relational congruence. I'd like to remind us of Eric's point in the first chapter. One of the ways we can demonstrate that create greater trust is to be proficient in the things that we're doing. We continue to do those well and to manage them well. Technical capacity.
I think it's really important in this relational congruence that if there's a disagreement, if there's a problem that arises out of disagreement, that leadership doesn't overextend itself. Oh, well, they're not on board very good, so let's go find somebody else who can take this place and let's move them in there some way. I think that's definitely not congruence, and I just really feel like that's a place where we need some work.
Putting aside personal agendas.
Or creating a group that will do what I want them to do. Not me necessarily, but whoever is the prevailing people in charge. That, if that pastor won't do what we want them to do, we'll send them packing. If those two people are mucking up our ability to move where we want to go, then let's get rid of them and vote them out. And willing to appreciate differences and work towards not compromise so much, consent. Where we can agree, where we can move towards some sort of consent.
I like the statement, and then I don't remember exactly where it was, how some man came and talked to him and said, the problem is your Sanhedrin. It's getting in the way. You got it all wrapped up, nobody else can do that. You got to go.
All right, we're still got about a quarter of an hour left, so 15 minutes to begin to tackle. Anything else about chapter 5? Okay. Why don't we go ahead and jump into chapter 6. One of my favorite quotes. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Lots of chuckles. Somebody talk about that.
I guess no matter what strategy you have, if there's an underlying way that people are going to have learned unintentionally or not, how to handle situations, how to deal with them, then you don't have a healthy culture going on. Sometimes it's not so easy to figure it out. But they become, I guess, the behaviors that the congregation has learned together over time. So the best strategy in the world is trying to remove that behavior.
It's hard sometimes to uncover those things because they're uncomfortable. And when that power is able to be wielded unchecked and unannounced, it does not like to be exposed. I was in basically a therapy group, and one of our persons was talking, and the director of the program was sitting in his chair and had fallen asleep. And this irritated the person that was talking, and finally the director kind of woke up and he goes, "You're still at it. You say the same thing week after week after week and nothing ever changes. I'm tired of it. And the person responded, well, fine, but I sit here and talk and pour my heart out and you fall asleep. And the director said, well, what's that say about you? We have to be willing as an organization and as individuals too, to be able to say, what does that say about me? And I will say this to you not because I'm afraid of it, but I've heard this said in a couple different contexts. Well, you know, Aloma is a place where we chew up our pastors and spit them out. And so the thought that rang in my head was just the same thing that the leader of that group said. Well, what does that say about Aloma? I'm not fearful of that, but really, what does that say about you? Is that who you want to be? I'm interested. And I think those are the rough, difficult questions. You know, is that who our church wishes to be? And some of the underbelly that happens in every organization. Are we willing to be able to point at that and say, yes, that's how we are, but we want to choose to be different. And how do we do that? Because all of us have things we can work on, and the organizations are different. So just to quote here, culture is the set of default behaviors and usually unexamined or unreflected practices that make up the organizational life and ethos of a company, organization, family, or church. In short, organizational culture is the way we do things around here.
That's not right away of that statement, but we've always done it this way. But does that way always work? That's always my question. Does it work?
Well, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a church or whether you're talking about a business. The effect is the same throughout. And, you know, you can take a lot of things we're talking about and look out at businesses that are successful and businesses that aren't, and look at some of the things that they're doing. One of the things that businesses that are successful that I see in talking to some of them is they get rid of a lot of the resentment and mistrust and ridicule that the employees feel against the upper management or the leadership. And I think that happens when you talk about beating up pastors and stuff like that. You've got to get past it.
And there are generally, when we identify those things, there are strengths about that and shadow parts, negative things about it as well. Boy, we're a church of strong leaders, and we have a firm direction of our church. And if a pastor comes and doesn't wish to work with us, instead working against us, that's not going to fly here. That's a strength of a congregation. I think that's good. But we're unwilling to compromise or make changes or take directions from an outsider. Well, hold on, that's too far. And so how do we find the strength that is within what's maybe, as it's practiced, is impacting the organization negatively? So always good and bad in both of those, so we can find the good in that and build it. Okay. How about some other things here from chapter 6?
It's not culture, something that's part of the DNA. Is it not something that really needs to be looked at and determined what parts are things that really need to be kept, what parts need to be looked at and adapted? You know what? Because sometimes some of the cultural things are so DNA, just so part of a congregation, that if we just came in and decided, all right, we're gonna get rid of that, I just wouldn't work. So I think we can't always look at culture as the bad, is I guess what I'm saying. And sometimes we tend to do that.
Yeah.
Especially as we look at it as we've always done things this way. You know.
The great news is we serve a transformation God. That's true. He can transform us from our nature, our DNA into something different. But I think the question would be, do we believe, and I think this is where the book is headed, that we can identify a strong enough mission and align to it in such a way that we are able to be adaptive and transformational in our behaviors? Can we get behind a compelling enough mission from God? That's one of our huge challenges. I don't know, sorry, did that little rhetorically. Thoughts about that? Add to that? Challenge that?
In one of the first chapters, he said that God has the church for his mission. So we are here for that mission. We need to identify the mission very, very fast because we're missing that generation. My sons, my daughter-in-law, they're not here. Your son, your daughter, they're not here, people. We need to get to them. So that's what we're identifying with this mission, with all these studies, with everything we're doing, hopefully. And that's going to be what we need to do. And yes, we're going to have to adapt and we're going to have to transform and pray. Pray, because if you pray, the Lord is going to do it.
Yes.
I'm not preaching.
Yeah.
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 Today.
Makes me think of the question that you hear so often is, well, how is that working for you? And as a whole, as a people, as a congregation, we need to start asking that question of ourselves and of our small groups. How is that working for us? Are we getting what we want? Or are we not? Because it's not reflective in who showing up and what who we're reaching and asking God as a group to come in and change our hearts and to ignite a new fire within us and to give us that vision and a new mission to drive that within us as a group, as a corporate body.
And I'm so glad to have undergirding that what we spoke about earlier this hour, permission to not get it right first.
Yeah.
Right. And that not all of our outreach and love for other people is going to be returned. And not all of our evangelistic conversations are going to result in the things that we want. But if our hearts are right, desires are right, the fruit that needs to be born will come to fruition.
The one thing that's Saturday, the reunion that was held, and Eric can probably say more, and Barb can say more about this, but was held, people who are in their 40s, early 50s, about right, who were youth here in what we call the MYF at that time, under Paul and Sylvia Cummings. And so they had about 50 people here, and I think several came from maybe 10 different states, not just from Florida. And there was a congruence in that group of families, families and leader and young people, that everything just, they hadn't been together in 40 years. And yet the impact that that youth group had on those young people just made all the difference. And that grew out of this church and its culture and its love and all this. And I just feel like there's some really bright spots that need to, that worked. And maybe it wouldn't work today. Maybe that what happened then would work. But they're just such powerful things that made life so different. And that's what I want to see. But your children and my children and all of our children is something that is so powerful that lives are just turned upside down.
So how do we begin, and in our process, to identify the principles and the biblical principles that were essential in the success of that group? I know this church has a history of this as well, and in one of the churches I served when I started as youth director there, parents came and showed me the record albums that the choir had made. The youth choir back 15 years ago. Look, and so I could have taken from that. So as a youth group, we need to make an album. But it wasn't that. It was the sense of shared purpose. It was working together for a goal. It was the authenticity with which the leaders engaged the students in something where they were empowered in their own giftedness to spur heights and to utilize that for the sake of Christ's mission. And we began to identify the principles of why it worked. then we went and did other things. We didn't make out, you know? And so from our successes in the church, how has God uniquely, consistently worked within this DNA? And what are the biblical foundational, timeless principles? And then how do we employ those in this culture? And that is a huge challenge that is before the church. Okay.
And then page 75 and 74 really kind of, struck me a little bit because just talking about, we as a church believe this. We as a church believe, in evangelism, but there's no adult baptisms that we must. Yeah. How much do we value really that? If we're not going out pounding the pavement for people to come in so that we can have, more baptisms, so we value it, but we don't show it by our actions. And same thing. You can apply that to different things, and I think that's where, for me, thinking about the culture and the things that are changing in our world. It's not that I don't think we won't compromise on certain things, but the avenue that we take to get there, we cannot do the same thing that we've always done, or we will just sit and do what we're doing now. And it really, I guess, just in the last maybe month or two, that really has struck me because I've been doing that in the school for 4 or 5 years. I realized that. I recognized that. I figured it out. I got on board and I changed the way we did stuff. And wow, it's made a huge difference. But that hasn't happened here. And I didn't recognize it either. And now I'm starting to recognize it's different. The world is different. Our beliefs are the same. We have got to be different. We have got to do things differently. Or we're going to be the people who say we value evangelism. But we really don't, because we do anything to make that happen. So that really struck me a lot, when I was reading through that part.
Yeah, the idea of it, and I think the word used here is embodiment. Are we embodying these values that we say? The congregation responded beautifully when we challenged them this summer. You say you believe in youth ministry, then where are the people willing to come and serve as youth leaders? And people in the church step up and have volunteered in there. It's been a great year for you. So how do we begin to do that in some other places?
We probably should say that for everything. You say you value fellowship,
but you're not willing to.
But you're not willing to.
But they're getting
to have it.
That's going to happen.
Those kinds of questions have to be asked to people who say, "But we want this. We think this is important." It's like, if you do, then what are you doing?
We're coming to the end of our time, and I think that's a really great place to end. And I was just going to quote something about that. It's from 82. You have to birth something new. You don't change by looking in the mirror. You change by encountering differences. Yeah. Eric sent me an email this week, and his reflecting and reading of the book. He talked a lot about worship can't be our only growth strategy. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Feel free to jump in and add anything you like. It's like in being so involved in missions, talk a lot about relational missions and relational evangelism, but we can't expect that the non-Christian who's never been to worship is going to walk into worship and go, "Oh, this is perfect for me." It's a completely different language and different feel, but we need to work at these multiple ports of entry. And come with us this Saturday because we're doing something to help women in this battered shelter, and then a group goes out the other way around. It has to be every which way upside down, and all these places being invitational. And it gets back to exactly where Barb is. Are we going to do what we say? And I think for one of the things that's before us is what's our journey? How do we move forward? The template that the book is presenting itself for our journey together once we're finished. It's going to be some strong work we'll need to do together. We're going to say goodbye to our folks here, and we'll talk about some strategies. We will not meet next week because it is Memorial Day, so that'll give you a longer 2-week time to read and reflect on the chapters moving forward. And all of part 3, and we'll do our best to work through that. And one of the things I will invite you to do is be thinking about how do we create better communication and trust and moving forward, how do we involve more people in this adaptive process that we're doing? We are the ones who are going to need to spearhead the core values, what are the things we're not going to compromise, our steps moving forward, our missional strategies. That's going to be born out of this group. Some of you may choose not to do that. We'll have other people that will join. But how do we make this a church-wide embraced process moving forward so that the change won't be only external, but will be internalized by the congregation as well? Martha, Virginia, would you pray for us going out as we close here?
Sure, shall we get up and start? Shall we do that?
Well, sure we can.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for this evening that we had a chance to explore and look at some possibilities for becoming the church that you have. Guide our thoughts, guide our very deeds as we interact with other people, both in the congregation and outside. Father, let us be your witnesses in this world. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Yeah. See you in 2 weeks.